Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. A very good morning to all of you, and I welcome you all to the next class of this ongoing knowledge series. A series where we have been taking up some of the most relevant topic for the UPSC Civil Services examination. The class for today will be focused on an extremely important and in-news topic from the subject of science and technology. Today we will be focusing on Ramjet Technology and Hypersonic Weapons. Not just this, in the course of this class, we will also be discussing about what exactly is a Scramjet technology and what are the differences between Ramjet and Scramjet. We will also be focusing on some of the other similar kind of technologies that exist and are being used and are being experimented on by nations across the world. Without any further delay, let's see what exactly brings this topic in the news. As you would know, superpowers around the world, most specifically powers such as the US, China, Russia, have made it a point to invest a lot of money and invest a lot of efforts specifically into bringing about new hypersonic weapons technology. Now, hypersonic weapons are special, and the main reason behind that is the speed at which that they travel. Now, hypersonic is any system or any missile that is traveling at least 5 times the speed of sound or more than that. In other terms, when you call it 5 Mach or higher, that is what makes it hypersonic. Now, the hypersonic missiles are special in the sense that they travel so fast that even though they may be detected by certain radar systems, it is extremely difficult for any of these missiles to be intercepted. And that is why these nations have been working towards mastering the hypersonic missile technology. India has also taken certain steps in the same direction, which we will discuss in the due course of this lecture. Also, one other interesting part here is, of all these 3 major superpowers that we have, US, China, Russia, the interesting part is, if you look at the global media, you will see that it seems that China is actually far ahead as compared to the other 2 nations when it comes to this particular technology. These news snippets that you see are just a few months old. For example, China is decades ahead of the US, and its hypersonic missile system can actually target many targets very precisely. Russia says it has also test-fired the hypersonic missile, while the US recently, when it conducted a hypersonic missile test, actually failed. So as you can see, this is another indication of the changing world order, of how the global power is actually shifting from the US to other nations, most specifically China. Now, these are some of the missiles that we know about. And when I say that we know about, I'm saying this because in most of the cases, and this is true with almost every powerful nation, US, China, Russia, they would never divulge all the details of their weapon system. Because at the end of the day, they don't want that when it comes for the time to use these weapons, they don't want the other side to be prepared about it. They don't want Chinese to just do a Google search and know everything about the US missile, right? So whatever details that we know in the media, do not expect them to be 100% true with regards to the weapon system specifically of these nations. However, even then, as per the experts who actually know about this matter, these are some of the missile systems that are under test in these nations. So we have the US system, which if you actually see is leaps and bounds over the other in the sense that its top speed is Mach 20. That is very high speed. Then we have the Russian system, that is Zircon, Mach 9 speed. We have a couple of Chinese one, DF-17, and then another Chinese one for which we don't know the real details. And if you actually see this last one, that is the Chinese project called the Fractional Orbital Bombardment System, its top speed is even more than that of the top speed of the US, that is even more than Mach 20. But not a lot of details have been divulged with respect to this particular missile system from China. Now, as I said, it's very easy to define hypersonic missiles or hypersonic weapons. It has got to do with speed at which that missile is traveling. Hypersonic speed means speed of 5 or more times the Mach. Mach means the speed of sound. So when you say 3 Mach, you mean 3 times the speed of sound. When you say 5 Mach, you mean 5 times the speed of sound. Now what exactly is the speed of sound in terms of real numbers? That is 343 meters per second. 343 meters per second, that is the speed of sound. 5 times that or above that would come in the category of hypersonic. Now in terms of hypersonic missile systems also, usually we have two types of missile systems. We have the hypersonic cruise missile and then we have the hypersonic glide missile. Hypersonic cruise missile are said to be just the faster versions of the usual missiles that we have, the usual cruise missiles that we have. They are just a faster version of that. As you know, cruise missiles are the ones that travel at lower altitude as compared to the other kind of missiles that actually ballistic missiles that go higher up, try to go outside the atmosphere and then glide into the target. So there is a glide version of the hypersonic missiles and then there is a cruise version which mainly depends on the altitude that these vehicles or these missiles have actually taken up. Most hypersonic missiles use Scramjet technology and we'll come to that. What exactly is the Scramjet technology? This is a kind of a air breathing propulsion system and I'll discuss in detail what exactly do we mean by this. This is just to give you an idea that hypersonic is not the only category when it comes to defining the missiles or these kind of systems on the basis of their speed. We have the subsonic, we have the transonic, supersonic, hypersonic and high hypersonic. Do remember, supersonic is slower as compared to hypersonic and I'll tell you why do you have to remember this in just a few minutes. So first comes the subsonic speed, then the transonic, then supersonic and then comes a hypersonic speed and you can also see the velocities which is just a multiple of the Mach speed. Now, where is India in this particular race? Where does India stand? Now, as you know, although we might not rank very higher up when it comes to other indicators and indices such as standard of living, socioeconomic inequality, but when it comes to having defense systems or working on the technologies of latest weapon systems, we are blessed to have a lot of these organizations which are at the prime of their working, be it the DRDO, ISRO, etc. And these two organizations have been working together in India specifically to bring about the hypersonic missile technology into India. So where does India stand right now? India has been said to be working in this direction for many years now. As I said, most of the nations do not want to divulge all the details of this kind of a system because they have to keep it a secret so that the surprise element remains intact. That is why you do not really see the government saying we are at this stage or third stage or second stage, but there are multiple think tanks around the world. There are multiple media stories around the world which indicate that India also has been working in this direction. India, in fact, has already proven its capabilities through the test of ASAT. ASAT, as you know, was Mission Shakti, under which we actually targeted a satellite. So anti-satellite missile, you could call it. If you remember a few years back, Prime Minister Modi made this announcement in the morning when he said that India under Operation or Mission Shakti was able to target a satellite. So our anti-satellite missile test was actually successful. Also, hypersonic missile technology, as I said, has been developed and tested by DRDO and ISRO together. Now, there have been two very important developments in this scenario in India. The first is DRDO has successfully flight tested hypersonic technology demonstrator vehicle which has a capability of traveling at 6 times the speed of sound. 6 Mach means it has entered the hypersonic stage. Secondly, for developing any of these kind of technologies, you can't always do a real life test. You have to make sure that you can simulate those situations. For example, if you have seen movies which are based on aircraft crash or aircraft investigation, you would see that there are aircraft simulators to train the pilots, etc. So when you have a new pilot, you can't expect them to fly the real plane. So there are technologies through which that environment is simulated. Similarly, for testing these kind of weapons also, you have to prepare simulators where exact situation can be made artificially, and this is what has been done. Hypersonic wind tunnel test facility of the DRDO has been set up at Hyderabad. It is a pressure vacuum driven enclosed free jet facility that can simulate Mach 5 to 12. So it is also a shot in the arm. That is, it is an advantage for India that now we do have that system and we can go ahead and start experimenting with the hypersonic technology. Now comes the second part of the chapter. That is the breathing propulsion system. Now try and understand this. When a rocket or let's say a missile is launched, when they actually take off, there's a lot of fuel that is used to give them the thrust. That is why you see a lot of fire and smoke coming out when any missile or satellite goes up. After that, when the satellite or the missile goes up, they require more energy so that they can continue on their path. Now, how does this energy come? This energy comes by the fuel that they have in store. Any of these missiles or any of these satellites mainly have two types of components. That is, they have or they require a fuel and they also require an oxidizer. Because just having fuel doesn't mean that you will get energy. For example, if I give you a bike or if I give you a car full of petrol or full of diesel, without the key to start and the car or bike is not starting, do you think just having fuel will ensure that your car or your bike moves? No, you have to start it, you have to ignite the fuel, right? That is where ignition works, that is why you call ignition. So just having fuel would not really make sure the satellite or the missile goes away. They also need an oxidizer to burn the fuel. Now this is where it becomes important. That is, when a rocket usually takes off, it is important that the rocket should not be very heavy. The heavier the rocket, the more difficult it would be for the rocket to reach higher altitude. Just like on the road, you see a truck and then you see a car or you see a motorbike or super bike. You would also know that the heavier the vehicle, the more difficult it is to actually increase its speed. So when the rocket goes up, it has fuel and it has oxidizer. The problem is the load of the oxidizer is very, very high. So they need oxygen in very, very large quantity so that when they go up, they can use it to burn the fuel and then the missile can go on its path. So the scientists have been working on this technology thinking that we already have oxygen in the atmosphere, right? So when we already have oxygen in the atmosphere, why do we need to carry our own oxygen in the missile? Let's take oxygen from the atmosphere. Let's do this, that our missile will only carry fuel, but we will not carry any oxygen. Oxygen we will take from the atmosphere. When the missile goes up, it is in the Earth's atmosphere, it can take up oxygen, it can burn the fuel. This will reduce the load of the missile considerably, and it will make it much more efficient, and it will make it much more easier to launch. This system or this technology, using which we take up oxygen from the atmosphere and we don't give any oxygen to the missile itself, that is called breathing propulsion system, where the jets or the missiles breathe from the atmosphere, they take up oxygen. Now, obviously, you can't take up oxygen when you're at a very high altitude. That is, oxygen is only available up till 50 kilometers of the Earth's surface. So up till that stage, up till 50 kilometers of the Earth's surface, the technology is that we will take up oxygen from the atmosphere. This is called breathing propulsion system. There are different types of breathing propulsion systems. One is called Scramjet. Then there is another kind of breathing propulsion system called the Ramjet. And then there's a third one also, which is called dual mode Ramjet. So all these three, Ramjet, Scramjet, etc., all of these three are actually breathing propulsion systems. Now, it is very easy to say that the missile or the rocket will go up, they will take oxygen from the atmosphere, they will burn the fuel, everything is fine. But it's obviously not as easy as we are saying. They are traveling at hypersonic speed. So at that speed, taking in the oxygen from the atmosphere, first taking in air and then making sure we have oxygen from it, and then using that oxygen to burn the fuel. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's very complex and difficult. That is why many years have passed on since the scientists have been working on this technology. This is a very, very simple version of the diagram which can make you understand. So this is where the air comes in, or this is where the oxygen comes in from the atmosphere. Since it is compressed, the temperature of that oxygen actually becomes very high and it is able to burn the fuel. This is where fuel is injected. When the fuel is burned with the oxygen, it gives a lot more energy, it gives it the thrust, and then it is let out from here. In simple terms, this is what happens in these kind of breathing propulsion systems, that you take in the atmosphere, compress it so that it can be used to combust the fuel in the middle, and then it is let go in the end, which gives it the thrust to move forward. These are the different types of systems that you would have. Now let me tell you the differences between the three, because this is very, very important for you. Mainly what is important for you is to understand difference between Ramjet and Scramjet. Let's first talk about the Ramjet technology. As I said, Ramjet is nothing but a kind of a breathing propulsion system under which the jet will move forward and it will take air or oxygen from the atmosphere. It will be used as an oxidizer to burn the fuel to give it energy. Simple. Now there are certain things that you need to understand here. How does the Ramjet technology work? So vehicle's forward movement is used to compress the incoming air for combustion. Earlier, what used to happen, if you can see in this diagram also, turbojet, when it was taking in air, it used to have many components here also. These are called axial compressors that used to artificially compress the oxygen, and then it could be used for lighting up the fuel. But now in Ramjet, you see there is no such component here. We are just using vehicle's forward movement to our advantage to compress this oxygen. So there is no axial compressor which was used earlier. Then fuel is injected in the combustion. This is the combustion, as I said, the middle part is the combustion here. The fuel is injected in the combustion in the chamber where it mixes with the hot compressed air and it ignites. This is the Ramjet system. However, the Ramjet system has some problems. As we discussed, how does a Ramjet system work? The rocket is moving forward, so it is intaking the oxygen, it is compressing it, and it is being used to light up the fuel. Meaning that it will only work when the rocket is moving forward. If the rocket is still, means when it is still to take off from the ground, then this technology will not work. You have to give your rocket or you have to give your system a certain minimum speed before this Ramjet technology can start to work. Because it needs a vehicle to move forward at a certain speed, only then the oxygen coming in will be compressed. So that is a very, very important takeaway. That is, it cannot produce thrust at zero air speed. So when you are launching the rocket for the first time, you need to launch it with using fuel and oxygen from the ground, and then after a certain speed, the Ramjet technology will come into the picture. Also, a Ramjet vehicle requires assisted takeoff, as I said, to accelerate it to a minimum speed where it starts to produce its own thrust. There is also one other important point here. That is, Ramjet works best at supersonic speeds only. When the speed increases to enter hypersonic range, then the efficiency starts to drop. So, as I said, the faster that the rocket or the vehicle is going, the more difficult it would be to take in oxygen from the atmosphere and do everything, because when you're taking in something means there is an open inlet and then you are taking it in. I'll just give a very simple example. If you drive a car, if let's say you are driving at a very high speed, let's say 100, 120 km per hour, 130 km per hour. If you drive with all the windows closed, your car will run very smoothly. Most of the good cars, you will not really have any balancing issue. But if you have your windows open, when the air is coming in and you have one window open or a couple of windows open, then at the same speed, your vehicle would not have that much stability. At the same speed, you might find it difficult to control your vehicle. Because if it is a closed vehicle, when there is no air coming in, then the stability is obviously much more. But in these kind of systems, when you want the oxygen to come in, means there is an inlet that actually gives a problem of ensuring stability. So what happens is, in this Ramjet technology, they can work fine till the supersonic speeds, which we discussed, 2 to 5 Mach. But when it actually becomes hypersonic, 5 Mach or more, then the system does not really work properly. So we want a better technology. What is that better technology? This is Scramjet. So Scramjet is an improved version of the Ramjet technology. How is it improved? Because it operates at hypersonic speeds and allows supersonic combustion, which gives it the name. Scramjet stands for Supersonic Combustion Ramjet. So SCRAMJET, that is supersonic combustion ramjet. It has mainly three components as we discussed. First component, the inlet, which will allow the oxygen to come in, compress the air, increase the temperature. Then the combustor, where the fuel will be mixed up with this hot compressed air to light it up, to give energy, and then the fuel will come out. That is a diverging nozzle from where the heated air will come out in the end. The speed at which the vehicle moves through the atmosphere causes the air to compress, as I said, and that is how it works. So Scramjet is an improved version of the Ramjet in the sense that Ramjet was not able to work at hypersonic speeds, while the Scramjet technology can work at hypersonic speeds. Then these are mostly the two that you usually talk about. Then there is one more version called the dual mode Ramjet. As the name suggests, this is just a combination of the two. That can work at lower speeds also, that can work at higher speed also, simple. So third concept is a mix of Ramjet and Scramjet called the DMRJ, which is dual mode Ramjet. The important part is it can work at both hypersonic and supersonic speeds. This is still a technology that is under development because a lot of nations or most of the nations started with the Ramjet technology. India's ISRO also has successfully demonstrated multiple times that we know how the Ramjet technology works. Now we are moving to Scramjet technology. After that would come the third, that is a dual mode, where the two technologies actually combine and bring about a third kind of technology, which has still not been developed by most nations. These are the things that you needed to know from this particular topic to solve almost any kind of question that can be asked in the prelims or the mains examination. Let me see very quickly if I have some questions. There's a question which says, which ministry is involved in the procurement of missiles from foreign countries? So, Ministry of Defense obviously would be the one. See, when you say missiles, it is obviously something that has got to do with defense. So, whenever we have any defense procurement, that has to be done through Defense Ministry only. Then I have a question, what is meant by pressure vacuum driven? So pressure vacuum means we have created a kind of a enclosed body where we can actually regulate pressure, bring it down to zero whenever we want, so that we can actually make sure that we create a situation where we can test extremely high speed missiles. So that is what pressure vacuum is, where we can ensure that there is absolutely no pressure from outside, zero atmospheric pressure, so that we can create situations on our own. Then I have a question, why India prefers hypersonic missile, not other? See, it is not just India. Every country in the world, when it comes to having defense weapon system, they would obviously want better technology as compared to what they had earlier. Hypersonic missiles are better as compared to earlier in the very simple sense is that hypersonic means extremely high speeds, speed of 5 times the sound or higher. Now, when you have a missile at a very high speed, what happens is it becomes very difficult for the other side to intercept those missiles. So usually what happens, if you, let's say, launch a missile from here, and this is the other party, what they will do is they have two systems. One they will have a radar, and then they will have a missile. The first responsibility is of the radar. So radar will see what is the path of this missile. Once it catches the path, once it catches, okay, this is the missile coming in from here, then their missile will be launched in order to combat that, in order to strike it mid-air, so that it does not reach their land. That is what usually happens, okay? That is what is the missile defense system, as you call it. That is how the S-400 also works. They catch some missiles in the air and then they actually intercept it mid-air so that they don't land here. That will only work if this incoming missile is not at a very high speed. If the incoming missile is at such a high speed, let's say hypersonic missiles, then even before this missile can take off and reach its position, the hypersonic missile would already have landed here. That is why it is not just India, but almost every developed nation, as we discussed, is trying to bring in new technology, which is hypersonic, to make their missiles much more lethal because of their speed mainly. Okay, then I have a question. What are the improvements in Scramjet over Ramjet? As I discussed, the main improvement is in the Ramjet breathing propulsion system. That propulsion system usually only works fine till the supersonic stage. What is the supersonic stage? If you remember, I showed you this table. The Ramjet system usually works well till the supersonic speed only. But once the missile or that jet system increases its speed and goes above 5 Mach, then the ramjet system usually destabilizes, then they are not able to work. So we have had an improvement over that. We have built Scramjet technology that works well at the hypersonic speed as well. So that is the main improvement of Scramjet over the ramjet technology. These are the questions that were given to me. This brings us to the end of this class. I really hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you do hit the like button, share it with the other friends who are preparing for the UPSC Civil Service examinations. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS, please do that right away and do comment how did you like this lesson. Thank you so much for watching.